And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another one of our relevant, thought-provoking webinars. Today's webinar concerns preservation of the 4.9 spectrum for public safety. My name is John Paul Jones, retired fire chief in Kansas City, Kansas, and the current executive director of the Public Safety Broadband Technology Association, otherwise known as the PSBTA. The PSBTA is about the people who drive change in the community. Within our thought leadership, the goal of bringing public safety together is of paramount importance. The PSBTA is made up of lifelong members of public safety, representing public safety, born out of the PSA, the original champions for our unified effort to create a national public safety broadband network. The mission of the PSBTA is to empower the first responder community by providing them with the tools and resources necessary to participate in the overall success of the network. This includes training a new generation of public safety professionals on the fundamentals of the network by providing access and a platform to trade ideas, innovations, best practices, and lessons learned that will lead to a smarter and more effective public safety. So as an association, our primary objective is to work as a broadband end-user advocate for first responders and the service providers. You've heard a lot over the years about FirstNet, but what is less known is that in 2002, the FCC allocated 50 megahertz of 4.9 spectrum to public safety, which stands separate and apart from our national public safety broadband network. Over the past couple of years, there has been a collective effort by several commercial non-public safety entities to take this spectrum from public safety and reallocate it for commercial use. Because of this, the PSBTA has sponsored the Public Safety Spectrum Alliance, known as the PSSA, to fight on your behalf to keep that spectrum for public safety use only. The diligent effort to keep our communications capacity and capability front and center and demonstrate how critical it is for first responders to stay informed and, when needed, come together for the preservation of this spectrum. Okay. A few housekeeping items before we start. All attendees have been automatically muted to reduce background noise. Any questions should be submitted directly to us through the question function, which is located at the bottom of this menu on the right side of your screen. Questions will be answered at the end of our panel discussion. Please keep your questions focused and as concise as possible. We will attempt to answer as many questions as possible and follow up with those that we don't get to during the live portion of the webinar. What we'd like to do today is to clarify the significance of the proposed changes to the 4.9 spectrum and how the PSSA is taking a stand in an effort to keep the 4.9 spectrum where it belongs, with public safety. So we will also broaden the understanding of why preservation of the 4.9 spectrum for public safety is so vital to the first responder. So joining us today are two of our PSSA member representatives, retired fire chief and former FirstNet board vice chair, Jeff Johnson, and Sue Swinson, former FirstNet board chair. So welcome to both of you, and thank you for being with us today. And
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
And as I turn the time over to each of you, if you would take a moment to briefly introduce yourselves and speak to your interest in preserving the 4.9 gigahertz spectrum for first responders. So with that, I will turn the time over to Chief Johnson to get us started with our webinar, Protecting 4.9 gigahertz for Public Safety.
Thank you, Chief Jones. It's a pleasure to talk to everybody today. Appreciate you taking time to join us. Retired fire chief, 33 years, ran a metro department for 15 years as the chief, Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue. Served as the president of the International Fire Chiefs, president of the Western Fire Chiefs. And one of the greatest privileges I had was to work on the legislative effort to create FirstNet, along with a group of colleagues, and then serve on the inaugural board for FirstNet. So it was created in 2012. And I served until 2018 and continue to be passionate about the mission of FirstNet and making sure that public safety is not only up to what your standard commercial customer would have, but actually have superior service. And I had the pleasure of meeting Sue Swinson, who I'll turn over here in a minute. But Sue has an incredible career in the commercial wireless business. She is in the Wireless Hall of Fame, and she is an adopted member of the public safety community. And I will tell you, it's been a genuine honor to be around her and to stay plugged in with her. Sue, thank you for what you do for public safety. You've been there for us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. It was the feeling is mutual. Obviously, as Jeff said, I spent most of my career in telecom. I started out in fixed telecom and moved over to wireless. Worked for all the wireless companies over my career, so I have a good reference on that. But I became a convert when I joined FirstNet. As Jeff said, I joined in 2012 as a member and became the chair in 2014 and served to 18. But I have to tell all of you listening, as a commercial person coming into the project, I absolutely had no idea how far behind public safety was vis-a-vis the commercial market and commercial users, both business and residential, consumer customers. So it was almost embarrassing as a commercial executive to come in and see that. And over the 6 years that I was involved in FirstNet, it became very clear that the effort to support and protect public safety was paramount for our country. So I continue to be passionate about it. I continue to work on behalf of public safety, and I'm delighted to do so. So Jeff, I'll turn it back to you and we can get started.
Thank you. Chief Jones, what do we have for us today?
Well, we got some questions coming in. And that the first question is, some have asserted that those in public safety should build their own network solution. How practical is that as a real world solution?
Well, it can be done, but not well. I mean, listen, I'm 64 years old and I've spent my entire life in public safety. And this has taken us back to the 70s, right? Just like everybody has their own network. I pass levies and build towers and buy technology that someone makes obsolete 8 years after I buy it or 6 years after I buy it. Devices are $15,000 a device, not 600 a device. Functionality is limited to World War II technology, push to talk, let up to listen. Like, this makes no sense. Like, why in the West where I live, you can have a wildfire in Oregon, California, Washington, wherever, and you'll have 6, 10, 15, 20 states bring resources to our wildfire. How do you create a system where everything is operable in a situation where every county, every city, every jurisdiction has their own network? Listen, if this was a good idea, every San Diego would have their own cell phone network, and Orange County would have their own cell phone network. It makes no sense. And Sue, I'd turn it over to you. You come out of this profession. I mean, does it make sense to you?
No, and I'll give you a specific example. I won't name the carrier where I worked because that would probably be embarrassing to them. But because of a lot of acquisitive activity, you need a network that's nationwide in order to serve customers and to be able to have an operable network. Because of all the acquisitions, actually the engineering organizations were across the region in multiple regions. And the organization was very frustrated because they couldn't deploy technology very efficiently or effectively. And whenever there's a problem, because you're always going to have a problem, you're going to have fiber digs, you're going to have CO outages, you're going to have failures of radios. It was really hard to resolve that. So having everybody doing everything different does not result in the best outcome for the user. So I mean, from my experience, you would never do anything like that. It doesn't make sense. And so why should public safety do it? So anyway, that's my view.
Yeah, it makes no sense, Chief. I mean, the bottom line is, I understand there are corporations that make their money convincing public safety that we need to build our own stuff. They sell stuff for higher prices. I understand people have motivation to do it, but it's not in the best interest of public safety. The FirstNet network, first in the world. This thing is fully operable, coast to coast, border to border. It's frankly, I can take my device internationally and have it work. It's there is no downside to full operability nationwide, no downside whatsoever. It brings down the cost of devices. It brings down the barriers of entry. I mean, just think about the cost of building your own and refreshing your own 5G network for your community. A, where do you start? B, the cost of such a thing is ridiculous. And as fast as these networks mature and change from 4G to 5G to 6G, which will keep going, you can't afford that as a fire chief or a police chief. You can't, and it doesn't make any sense from a operability and interoperability perspective.
Okay, Chief, let me just add something to that. I mean, if you think
Please.
back to why Congress legislated the development of the NPSBN, it's exactly what you said. The public safety mission does not stop at a jurisdiction or border. I mean, so that's one comment. All local jurisdictions are not equipped or funded to provide oversight of what's required to build and manage a network at the level that public safety needs. So some jurisdictions across the US, sure, they probably have better funding than others, right? I mean, is that fair to assume that some of the bigger jurisdictions have that? But one of the things that Congress was trying to alleviate, and you know, we heard a lot of it when we went to Capitol Hill, is that's great for LA, San Francisco, New York, Chicago, and all of Miami. But what about me in Idaho? What about me in Wyoming? I have the same needs there. And so I think that people have to recognize that having that standard approach, you don't have the haves and have-nots. And as you said, without scale, companies are not going to make the decision to invest. They're not going to do that. And I have personal experience with that with a very small, you know, hardware company, and had to make decisions to say, we can't do it because the market's not big enough. So I think, you know, those are the reasons that the public safety broadband network exists today. And I think it has the same application as we think about future technology for public safety. And why do you think that all the states and commonwealths opted into FirstNet? Because they said, I mean, you know, Jeff, you had a lot of conversations with people in different states, and they did contemplate doing their own network. And when they realized it didn't make sense, they said, why would I do that? And so that's why we had 100% opt-in to FirstNet.
That's an excellent point, Sue. I neglected to think of it that way. But, you know, when FirstNet was created, each state was required to receive a plan from FirstNet, and the state could choose to build the network on their own or go with FirstNet. 56 states, territories, and Commonwealth, all of them, 100% chose to join the nationwide network, because when you get down at the granular level, there's just really no functional way to pull this off, absent the kind of scale that a nationwide network brings. This is an excellent point.
So I think that kind of answers it, Chief.
That goes into the category, Chief Jones, of don't get us started, right? Because we have to talk all day on that.
Especially together. Especially together.
Yeah, exactly.
That was perfect. And so, got another question coming in. If 4.9 isn't available for FirstNet, then what are the options?
There are none. There are none. I mean, like, why it's like, oh my goodness, this thing is pretty binary or linear in my mind. It's this easy. The FCC gave 4.9 spectrum to public safety. They didn't give it to one of the wireless carriers. They didn't give it to anybody else. They gave it to public safety. Well, what do you do if you're public safety and you have 50 megahertz of spectrum? Well, the logical thing to do is apply that to public safety's network. That's it. And there's only one nationwide public safety broadband network, the NPSBN. There's only one, and that's FirstNet. By law, there's one. Everyone else that serves public safety, that's a current choice they're making. There
Mhm.
is one NPSBN, and the contractor who happened to win that bid is AT&T. This isn't about AT&T, it's about public safety's network. AT&T put their balance sheet on the line and made a 25-year promise to public safety. So they made a 25-year promise. Um, Listen, other people can come and go in this market. They can wake up tomorrow and their board of directors can say, we're not serving public safety. And they're out. Whatever you think you were getting, you're not, because there's no contract. You need a plan and you need a promise. And you need public safety oversight. And we have those things built into FirstNet. We have a plan, it's right in front of you. We have a promise that's bound at the corporate level for 25 years. And we have a public safety oversight board. Anything short of those three things misses the mark. So what do we do without 4.9? I don't know. I think it's nothing. And I don't know why we would. Public safety has the spectrum. It's ours. It's no one else's. Everyone else has an opinion on it apparently, but it's public safety spectrum. And that needs to go to public safety's network. Sue, you have a thought?
Yeah, the way I think about this, and I mean, I think people are used to spectrum auctions, Chief, that there's an abundance of spectrum out there, but I think people who are listening probably also know that there's been some issues around spectrum auctions. There haven't been several, for a couple of years. And the people who are generally getting that spectrum, like you said, are large companies, smaller companies, whatever. They've got conditions where smaller companies get it. But the last time I checked, I don't think public safety has a checkbook to enter into an auction. And so this is why it's so important. This is why spectrum was legislated to public safety for the good of the country and the citizens in the in the country. But there's not an opportunity for public safety to advance their technology. As people, 5G has almost become an afterthought at this point. We're already talking 6G. And so one of the things that I really felt when I was at FirstNet, as I said, I was pretty embarrassed as a commercial provider to kind of realize the disadvantage that we'd put public safety in the United States. And I said, I really hope that we can make sure that public safety never is behind in technology again. Public safety should not be behind the technological curve of the rest of the nation. So if they don't get this, I don't know what they're going to do. And so we're going to go backwards because we're going to basically have public safety basically running in place while everybody else is running ahead. And I just don't think that makes sense to do that. So I don't think you guys do bake sales or anything like that. There's no way that public safety could enter in and get additional spectrum. So we have to have this to continue the promise, Jeff, that we made to public safety when we had FirstNet.
That's a great point, Sue. I wonder, like, I've got a figure, right, that your typical fire chief or police chief, they probably don't think about things like spectrum auctions. Now, it's just going to back up a little bit, like, what is spectrum, right? Spectrum is a principle of physics. I mean, in the most simplistic fashion possible, the federal government controls spectrum in the United States. They do. They can license it to you or they can auction it to you. And spectrum are invisible lanes through the sky on which data rides. Because I'm a fire guy, I like to think of it as a fire hose. The fire hose in and of itself doesn't do anything, but it is the conduit by which you move water from the hydrant to the pumper. So guess what spectrum is? It doesn't do anything in and of itself, but it is the pipe by which you move data from its point of origination to its endpoint and back. And the rights to that fire hose of data, as it were, those are either licensed or auctioned. And commercial wireless companies, this is how they have to have spectrum. Like if you're going to have wireless communications, you must have spectrum. And the federal government holds auctions for that. And just to create some context, it wouldn't be uncommon for a typical auction to raise, well, I think the last public safety auction we did was to raise money for FirstNet. And that was on the upside of $45 billion for that slice of spectrum. that we auctioned, right? $45 billion. Like, what are we going to do, fire chiefs? If we give up our spectrum, yours, if you give up your spectrum to somebody else for some other purpose, where are you going to get spectrum for your nationwide network? We can't all chip in and compete with the big wireless carriers and hope to compete at 30, 40, 50, 100 billion dollars. We use our spectrum that the FCC or Congress gave us, and we use it for our collective purposes. And I like to back up, Chief Jones, going back to your original question, like, I guess theoretically we could all go build our own network, but not only did we build FirstNet to end that phase of our professional life, and to create a broadband network which we could move data over, but more importantly, the test in whether we were right would be measured based on how many people have made that transition. And today there's in 5.5 years since we deployed the network, 5.3 million connections. Over 25,000 agencies have voted with their feet, and they're on this network, and they're here because it works and it's better and it's public safeties. So at the end of the day, we could suggest going back to horse-drawn carriages. Well, it's probably quaint and charming, but it's the digital equivalent of going back. It makes no sense to me.
Well, and that speaks to the urgency of this issue. And next question that came in, related to that, if we lose the spectrum to non-public safety entities, can we ever get it back?
I don't see how you get it back. It's like, that's almost a question like, if we let someone build an apartment building on our empty lot, can we get it back? It's like, no, I mean, people that get it are going to do something with it. And when they do something with it, then it's occupied. And when it's occupied, you're not getting it back. I mean, Sue, this is kind of your world.
Well, the only way you would, if people obviously sell things, but again, you don't have the resources to do that. So, that's just not going to happen. That's not a practical situation. I think it's important to note too that, I'm going to say something that's probably unpopular, but, the reason we have taken the position that we have about following the same, basically, kind of plan and approach to the NPSBN for 4.9 is all the reasons we've stated. But I think public safety has to remember, and you may not, because things have changed and time passes and people don't remember, Chief. But you and I've talked about the fact that for 25 years prior to FirstNet, public safety used to ask the wireless carriers about giving them what they needed, right? Giving them what they needed. And basically the carrier said, no, and we either can't or we won't do it. And so I think it's also important for people to remember that the things that are provided by the NPSBN today would not have happened without the work that you did early on to get the legislation. And then, unfortunately, without government oversight, entities are able to, for whatever reason, whether it's economic reasons for their company, whether it's shareholder concerns if they're a public company, people can say today, yes, we're going to do this, but without the government oversight, and trust me, I thought I'd never say this, without the government oversight, people back away from these things. And I think public safety should be concerned about that. To have individual arrangements like that with commercial entities that don't have this kind of structure, I think you put public safety at risk. That's something that really concerns me. And I don't think, if you've never been through that, and you haven't seen it from my side, because I know it from my side and I know how people think on my side, without that entity of the FirstNet Authority and the government sitting over the top, public safety is at risk. So I just wanted to make that point about, not about getting it back or anything. You may lose it. You think you're going to be going into a good deal, and then it's going to be pulled out from underneath you, and you can't do anything about it.
It's an excellent point. To that point, right? If you were there, you know this, but a lot of people weren't in the room. But those of us that were working on the FirstNet legislation, we hit a point where the White House was not as supportive as we needed them to be. And we approached the administration and said, listen, what's it take? And Anish Chopra was the chief technology officer for the United States at the time. And Anish said, I want to talk to the wireless carriers. We're going to get them all in the room. And they got in all the major wireless carriers in this nation, and they put them in a room with us. And the question was posed to each of them individually. Will you give public safety priority and preferential treatment on your network for emergency business? Every carrier stood up and said, no, we won't. And when pressed further about why they wouldn't, the common theme was there isn't a compelling reason to our shareholder value. There isn't a compelling reason for our shareholders to do that. We exist as a company to give a return on investment for our shareholders. That's what we do. What you're saying, we understand, is meaningful and important, but there's no meaningful reason our shareholders should do that. Well, they taught us an important lesson that day. Number one, the administration walked out of that room and said, we're in. If the carriers won't address public safety's needs because there's not a financial compelling reason, then we are in the game and we're going to help create what we now know as FirstNet. That's number one. Number two, what it taught us, who are public safety people, and we don't generally think like that, it taught us that you have to create a nexus between a company's shareholder value and what public safety gets, ergo the contract Sue was just talking about. That when a company bid for the right to serve public safety, AT&T won that competition, by the way. When AT&T bid for that, we created a contractual relationship between AT&T and the FirstNet Authority representing public safety. That contractual relationship is the nexus to shareholder value, right? They have to do it. It's a 25-year commitment. They have to do it. Anybody else that doesn't have that contractual commitment, it's just noise. They can be in it today, out tomorrow. And it's just whatever's in the best interest of their shareholders. As a guy that has a 401k or two, I actually appreciate that. But I don't like to confuse the two issues. Commitment to public safety is a contractual requirement with oversight of public safety, the first authority, and the company benefits and there's a relationship with the shareholders.
Right. So Chief Jones, we've gone, once again, you get Jeff and I together. I know it's, you ask a simple question, we can't stop, sorry.
Great information. We have another question coming in. It says both sides of this debate talk about local control. How does the PSBTA position provide for local control?
Chief, why don't you take that?
Well, let's start with local control. I think we already made the point that each of the 56 states opted in, so they voted with that opt-in decision, number one. So number two, it's like, well, what is local control? Does that mean I want the right to build my own network and buy all the stuff and maintain it and keep the security up? And is that local control, or are we concerned about local control being functionality? So to me as a chief officer, here's what I care about, is that I can control the functionality of my communications equipment so that I can fulfill the needs of that emergency. That's what I want. And FirstNet has the ultimate level of local control. Local control to me isn't, I want to conjure up a way to go build my own network. Local control is I'm using my FirstNet tool, and this emergency just transitioned from a fire event to a law event. And I can, with my FirstNet tool, prioritize law enforcement, prioritize fire. You can change the priority within that network. And that's local control. I care how the car performs, not whether I have the whether I ought to build my own car or not. I guess that's a good analogy, is that I care how it performs. And FirstNet gives you, as a chief officer, the ultimate control over the network. Sue, what did I miss?
Yeah, you know, I think it's an interesting question, Chief Jones, because I think, and I've actually reached out for a couple of folks to see if I can understand what that means. I think you have to go deeper than just using the word local control, because it does mean, as Chief Johnson said, you think about it differently. If it's local control to extract economic benefit, that's one issue of local control. I think about it in terms of being able to serve the public safety community in the most effective way. So I think maybe there's a little bit of difference in terms of how we're looking at it. And so just asking that top level question, frankly, I don't think it's adequate. I think we have to have a conversation to say, what does it mean when you say you want local control? Because that's a pretty broad statement. And Chief Johnson has given you what it means. And frankly, the FirstNet network has given operationally to the people who need to run an incident and are in charge the ability to have local control over the resources that they need to solve their problem. That's how I think about it.
Oh, absolutely. We'll explain. And so to get to the next question, there are currently users in the spectrum, in the 4.9 gigahertz spectrum for public safety. And what happens with your plan?
I'll start, Jeff. One of the things,
Yeah, please.
Jeff, I'll start. You know, we have said over and over and over again, our first principle actually is to protect the incumbents, Chief Johns. It really, you know, that is paramount. And people may have forgotten that we had incumbents in Band 14. You know, when we got the spectrum, you know, through the legislation, we had incumbents in there. I was personally involved in making sure that the incumbents were protected, and we worked with NTIA and the FirstNet organization, and over time, you know, we protected every single incumbent, and it wasn't a negative outcome for them. They ended up better or best, and there wasn't a cost to them to be protected. So that is our primary and first principle at PSSA, is to protect the incumbents. So if we did it in Band 14, I don't know why people think we wouldn't protect the incumbents, you know, in what we're doing today. But Chief, please add.
No, there's nothing to add. That's well said.
All right. So I'll get to the next one. Question from the audience. How do you read the announcement by the California OES about opposing the PSSA proposal for 4.9 gigahertz?
Chief, you need to take that one.
Yeah, listen, they have some bright people there, and so you know, I actually love the fact that the FCC's process asks provocative questions about issues that matter, and people have an opportunity to respond for the record. And
Uh-oh, we lost Chief. He's just so the audience knows, Chief Johnson was trying to get home yesterday, and his flight was canceled because of ice and snow. So he's a little bit in transit, so he'll probably get connected back on. I think just to finish his comment, you know, not having talked to him specifically about it, is I think the FCC process is very inclusive and very complete in terms of getting everybody's opinion. I mean, I see him do that in every proceeding. And so I think, you know, everybody certainly is entitled to their opinion. And there's probably rationale. I haven't talked to Cal OES, you know, why that is, but I'm sure they have very good reason why they would oppose that, just like other people may have an opinion about why they oppose it. So Jeff, I was just finishing up your comment saying, you know, I agree with you about the fact that it's the FCC's process has always been very transparent and inclusive, and we want to hear everybody's opinion because you get the best outcome. But please continue.
yeah, thank you. My Wi-Fi booted me for some reason.
Okay.
I think it's all of that. Plus, I think it's California is not typical. You know what's the saying, right? It's the world's third largest economy. the fact that even if it did work and work well in California, that doesn't create a nationwide network that other responders can rely on when they come to California. And I think that from a public safety response perspective, I think we have got to completely focus on operability and the ubiquitous nature of technology, such as FirstNet is, and I don't think they're typical.
I think we can, Chief Jones, we can see if we have another question. Are you there?
Yeah,
There
I
you
have
are.
some. So this was an interesting, kind of a lengthy question, but it came in. The FCC is looking for a band manager for 4.9 gigahertz. Do you believe FirstNet and AT&T are best positioned to offer that together and incorporate with Band 14 and current technologies? And how do you respond to Circe's and notably T-Mobile's and Verizon's contention that AT&T should not be the default band manager through, though they already are the band manager for FirstNet?
Jeff, you can clarify because I think people are conflating some things. So why don't you start
Right.
and I'll come back.
Well, number one, the band management function is actually, my understanding, it's actually distinct from what FirstNet would do. So
Right.
I actually think the FCC's expectations is that they'll appoint a committee that will recommend a band manager. And I think it'd be our perspective that is another party other than FirstNet. I think FirstNet should run, manage, and operate the network and deploy the spectrum in the way that they have FirstNet. But I don't think there's a large argument to be had over whether there's a band manager managing the incumbents in the spectrum. Sue?
Yeah, no, our position at PSSA, Chief Jones, that establishing a band manager is important to protect the incumbents from interference. I mean, that should be their main responsibility. It should be separate and apart. And I think it's an interesting situation because I hear people conflating FirstNet Authority and AT&T all the time. I think people use. So I think it's really important that people understand, because people say we shouldn't give, FirstNet Authority the nationwide license. Congress actually gave FirstNet Authority the nationwide license for 700 megahertz for Band 14, and it didn't result in an automatic access to AT&T for that spectrum. The authority put together, we were there, very robust outreach and consultation with everybody in the nation. I think you were familiar with that, Chief Jones, because you were part of that. And as a result of that, created an RFP that then encouraged people to bid on the opportunity to be the nationwide public safety broadband network. So it wasn't an automatic access. And if you think about it, with the authority getting the license, they're going to have to go through and develop a spectrum plan they're going to have to figure out what's the best way to optimize this. Because as you know, 4.9 has been significantly underutilized. I think it goes back to all the reasons that we've been talking about during this webinar. Fragmented, people doing their own thing, no market opportunity to build devices or technology to support it. So we don't disagree with that. We think it's underutilized. But the FirstNet network shows how you can optimize that and make sure that the utilization is good. But there is separation of church and state between the FirstNet authority and AT&T. And I think people need to recognize that the authority's role and responsibility is to oversee and hold accountable AT&T. Obviously, they work with them, but they're not one and the same. And it's not going to result in, okay, you get the license and now just transfer it to AT&T. The authority is going to have to go through a similar process to make sure that they optimize that. They have a responsibility to optimize that spectrum, just like they did with the FirstNet, with the nationwide public safety broadband network. So I think people have to start separating these and recognize it's not an automatic pass-through. We would never recommend that. Frankly, that's not in the best interest of public safety.
Well said, Sue. I think Just on that topic, FirstNet is a brand name, and that's what we call the service that you receive, FirstNet. But the actual governmental authority is the FirstNet Authority, the First Responders Network Authority. It's known as, the authority or the FirstNet Authority. They govern that contract with AT&T. And the fact is, right, it's AT&T today because they won the competition for the right to serve public safety. They had their own reasons to do it, but they signed a contract, and the authority's job is to hold them accountable and make sure that contract's fulfilled. So at the end of that contract, it could be somebody else. I mean, it's easy to say AT&T this and AT&T that. Well, they have the current contract, I get it. But someone's going to rebid this contract when it comes back up, and it may or it may not be AT&T. In either event, the authority is going to exist to hold whoever is the future contractor, hold them as accountable as they're doing AT&T today.
Chief Jones, I just want to say one thing in addition to what Chief Johnson just said. It was interesting to go through the process because obviously this was a great opportunity for many companies to be interested in doing this. But I think one of the challenges that companies find is that, I think what was sort of daunting is you're going to have oversight by the federal government. Public companies and wireless companies are not used to having, they are in a way, but not on a contract basis have that kind of oversight. So that may have caused people to not be interested because, as you know, not every wireless carrier bid for that opportunity. AT&T came with a very robust, proposal and, have delivered on that commitment. But I just find it really interesting about why people choose not to participate in that. And I think they need to recognize that we were very rigorous in our requirements. And I think people, we're a little concerned about that, to have that government oversight. That's a huge obligation for a publicly traded company to now have government oversight for, a frankly large part of their business. But AT&T said we want to make that obligation, and I can assure you the authority is holding their feet to the fire all the time. And remember too, in addition to just the authority, remember the authority sits inside NTIA, sits inside Commerce, and then there's all kinds of regulatory people in the federal government who are always looking at everything everybody does. Not everybody's excited about doing that. But in the end of the day, from a public safety perspective, if I was officially in public safety, I would want that. Because as we said earlier, people can walk away from commercial agreements. Maybe you have to pay to get out of those arrangements or you get sued by somebody. But to know that AT&T is going to be there for the duration of their commitment, public safety, I think Chief Johnson wants certainty. And I think that this is the only way through the legislation that happened. That's why we're such big advocates for taking the same approach.
Correct.
And
Chief Jones, just to help you out, when I dialed back in, I was worried my link was broken, so I dialed back in under Sue's link. So we're both Sue Swenson. I'll leave it to the viewing audience to determine which is the real Sue Swenson.
Perfect. Another question came in so other than backhaul, is 4.9 being used right now? And so what new innovative users are being looked at for 4.9? The uses, what new innovative uses are being looked at for 4.9?
Well, maybe we start with 4.9 is a very good mid-band spectrum for 5G purposes. So, that is its highest and best use in our eyes. There are people today using those to point-to-point data networks, et cetera. And the FCC is currently conducting research on making sure they get a granular view of exactly who and how many and where. That's going to be necessary to protect them. We have to know who they are to protect them. And so I think that's the short answer.
Yeah, what I would add, Chief Jones, is as you know, there's an entity within NTIA called Public Safety Commercialization Research, and there is they tend to look out bit into the future. And I know that they're looking at different applications of this, particularly, and as you know, they're focused on public safety. But again, until that becomes, until the framework of how that's going to be deployed is more clear, then people are not going to take the time to invest necessarily right now. I mean, maybe there's some looking at it sort of conceptually, but to really dive into that and then look at that. And that's the beauty of having a market and an ability to look at that on a nationwide basis, because then people look at the innovation that occurred with the 700 band. I mean, we have Z-axis. I mean, Z-axis would never have occurred, without, I can assure you, never would have occurred without PSBN and that focus. And when you think of mega range and you think of all the different things that have come out of that, and remember at the beginning of this, people said nobody's going to build a handset. I mean, nobody's going to build a handset with this. I think there's over 700 devices now with Band 14, something like that. So I think people believe that there will be innovation, but until there's more clarity, I think you're going to see a lot of innovation once people have an understanding. In fact, when we were at FirstNet, I mean, people were trying to make that call on, okay, when am I going to make my investment? And people were waiting for a more definitive outcome before they decided to make the millions of dollars or billions of dollars investment that they had to drive innovation. And that's what happens in a company. So I'm sure people are thinking about it, but the money's not there yet.
Excellent. And so is it, here's a question kind of related to that as far as, looking forward thinking and I guess currently as well. Is it reasonable to think this spectrum could serve to share drone imagery live from incidents and disasters?
Well, it's 5G by its nature is about moving high-speed data and moving a lot of data and rich data. So there's a myriad of uses. Drone would be an example probably, but I think any 5G use, which is high speed, high capability. I think anything like that, whether it's drones or robots or whatever, or just moving data much more quickly. We're at a point. We're at a point in public safety where initially we didn't have a broadband network that we could rely on. We just didn't. And now that we have a mission critical public safety broadband network, which is FirstNet, we're just seeing the evolution. We're seeing the evolution of devices, uses, and functionality that shows up on our emergency scenes. It's just growing and growing and growing. And I think 5G is just the next obvious evolution.
Nothing to add.
Sure. So this question is, can you talk about about how the 4.9 spectrum has had little use in the last 20 years and how your plan expands that access to the spectrum for all first responders?
Yeah, I think we touched on it a little bit, Chief Jones, and that is because it's so fragmented. I think that contributed to the underutilization. There wasn't a broad ecosystem for people to develop, the technologies. And I think we've shown how FirstNet, with a much different approach, is going to drive usage and innovation, for that. So I think that really is the contributing factor. I mean, obviously it's used in particular places. I think Chief Johnson, I think there's still some clarification that I think the FCC is looking at the number of users and where it's concentrated. And I think we're going to find that it's concentrated in the larger jurisdictions, Chief Jones, I think, versus the smaller jurisdictions. And so I think that, I think that's what's contributed to the underutilization. So we don't disagree with that. I think the commissioners all agree with that, which is why they're, proceeding with this. So I think that's why they're interested in what's the model that's going to drive the best utilization of the spectrum, because that's their job, is to make sure that the spectrum is utilized appropriately.
Well said. I think if you think about spectrum, since it is limited, And I mean, just from a physics perspective, it's limited. You can't make more of it. It's kind of like beachfront real estate, right? There's only so much of it. So it's about how do you efficiently use it. And the FCC commissioners and frankly the administration, every administration for the last 3 or 4 have been consistent that they want any spectrum that's deployed, they want maximum utilization of that because there's such a thirst for spectrum. So, it's kind of the heart of our plan with FirstNet and the D block and the band 14 spectrum is that we wanted that spectrum used for commercial purposes to take load off whoever was the winning bidder off their existing network, if that were the case. But when public safety needs it, it's always empty. So if you look out the public safety windshield at that spectrum, it's always empty. But the fact is there's a lot of digital cars on that freeway on a daily basis. We just can't see them because the technology allows that freeway to be empty all the time. So I think the administration and the FCC, and I think from a policy perspective makes sense. I think anybody that shows a path or a vision to get the most out of any spectrum that's deployed, I think it's going to be seen with great favor.
Absolutely.
So here's a question. The PSSA has said in a prior filing that the FirstNet Authority should be permitted to choose the band manager. Is that still your position? And wouldn't that create a conflict? I know you spoke to that a little bit earlier, but
Chief, yeah, I mean, we basically, actually, I don't think it really matters, and I don't think it's a conflict because the role of the band manager is to deal with interference. But to the degree that the FCC wants to name the band manager, I think that's fine. I mean, it's a function that's needed, and I think there's plenty of organizations out there that would be, and frankly, public safety organizations who would be well equipped to be the band manager. I think, Jeff, you know more about that than I do.
Right. Well, like you, Sue, I care about the outcome. I care that 4.9 spectrum is deployed for public safety and for 5G purposes, and who and how the band management occurs. I think we're fairly flexible on. I think there's plenty of capable folks to do it. In our prior filing, when we said that, it seemed efficient and logical to do it that way. But the FCC may have a different opinion, and they tend to make pretty informed decisions.
Right.
all right. So the next question is, do either of you have any financial connections to AT&T?
No, like, what do you mean, like financial connection? Like, do I own stock? I don't think I do.
Are you getting paid? Are you getting paid by AT&T to be their spokesperson?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so I can speak to that. I have no consulting agreement with anybody, particularly AT&T. So I'm not getting paid by anybody. I've become a zealot for public safety. My family has served a lot in the military, and I really feel like this is my chance to give back to the country through public safety. I did work for AT&T years ago. I ran a joint venture, a wireless joint venture for AT&T and AirTouch in the Bay Area. So I have worked with AT&T, and I know a lot of the people there. Frankly, I know a lot of the people at Verizon because AirTouch sort of, if you remember, AirTouch became, Verizon. Worked at T-Mobile, so I mean, but no, I have no financial arrangement with AT&T.
Yeah, I want to just expand on that a little bit. It's like nobody pays me to represent public safety's interests on behalf of FirstNet, AT&T, or anybody else. That I have my opinions about how public safety should be represented and what kind of services they should have based on a 33-year career in public safety. So AT&T doesn't retain me or pay me in any way to represent this opinion and to advocate on their behalf. No, nor does the authority. Sue and I don't work for the authority either.
No. So we're just honest. We believe we're honest brokers on this whole topic, Chief Jones, and we're happy to try to, take a position that we think is in the best interest of public safety. That's the place to be.
Absolutely. And being cognizant of the time limitations, I think last question here. Can you talk about how the 4.9 spectrum has had little use in the last 20 years and how your plan expands that access to the spectrum for all first responders? And I think we touched a little bit on that earlier, but if you could entertain that one.
Well, we did touch on that. I think putting that spectrum on the devices that are in the hands of public safety responders will increase its utilization and the practical application of it.
Absolutely.
Excellent. All right. So, any closing comments? As we come to a close.
Yeah, I hope this has been helpful for people to understand the position of PSSA. I hope they understand better why we're representing those positions on behalf of public safety. We're very pleased with the process that the FCC is going through to, get the best outcome for public safety, and we'll continue to advocate for public safety as long as we are breathing. Right, Chief?
Couldn't say it better.
You bet. So for the audience, and first of all, thank you so much. We're very honored to have you, here today, and with the what I would consider urgent and valuable information for public safety, what they need to know right now, and that there's a lot of things happening that they need to pay attention to. And I think you've given a lot of insight today. So we realize that there's a myriad of issues that first responders have to stay abreast of, and the expanding needs for broadband spectrum should be at the forefront of our collective goal of allowing public safety communications to innovate our way into the future. And I think, as you so very informatively and eloquently explained, so that is why the PSBTA and the PSSA are working hard on your behalf. And so we all hope you enjoyed our webinar today and appreciate your interest in this time-sensitive effort. And again, we are the Public Safety Broadband Technology Association. We want to be your advocate to preserve our broadband capacity and capabilities. By being here today, I think, we had a robust audience and had some terrific questions. And with this effort, you help support our efforts to continually bring you this cutting edge information about current and developing matters specific to public safety broadband communications. So please take a moment to lend your support to the 4.9 spectrum preservation efforts by communicating with your peers as to the critical nature of this effort. If you have any additional questions on today's topic, please email us at info@thepsbta.org. And for more information on the PSBTA in general, please visit our webpage at thepsbta.org. So this concludes our webinar in Protecting 4.9 gigahertz for Public Safety. Thank you again for your time. Goodbye, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.